There are some people walking this earth who, from the outside, look like they've conquered everything worth conquering. They carry the titles, the accolades, the financial freedom most only dream about. Their calendars overflow with obligations that matter, or at least seem to, and their social circles reflect back an image of undeniable achievement. Yet somewhere between the applause and the next goal, in the thin silence that lives between accomplishments, a voice rises from the depths, a whisper that grows into a scream. Something essential remains unlived. This isn't the ache of failure. It's the haunting echo of a self that was left behind, a soul watching from the shadows as the performance of a perfect life unfolds on stage. Carl Jung saw this phenomenon clearly. When the persona, that necessary social mask we wear to navigate the world, grows so dominant that it devours the authentic face beneath, the result is not triumph, but a peculiar form of spiritual starvation. Before we go deeper into this hidden crisis, I want to invite you to join this community of seekers. If this exploration resonates with you, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. Each week, we release content designed to guide you through the labyrinth of self-discovery, drawing from Jungian psychology, spirituality, and the practices that lead to genuine wholeness. You'll find additional resources, reading lists, and extended reflections in the pinned comment and description below. This is a journey best walked together, and your presence here matters. Now, back to the unlived self, hiding inside the architecture of success. The persona is not inherently the enemy. Without it, we would have no capacity for social cohesion, no shared language, no ability to function within the structures that allow civilization to exist. The persona is the diplomat between the inner world and the outer demands. But the crisis begins when identification with the role becomes total, when the individual starts to believe the mask is the face. You become what others expect, what the role demands, what the applause rewards, and in that bargain, the inner dialogue goes silent. Success, then, stops being an expression of the self and becomes a prison dressed up as freedom. Every external validation reinforces the bars. The I becomes an echo chamber of collective projection, a hall of mirrors reflecting only what others want to see. Jung understood this as more than a psychological problem. He saw it as a spiritual emergency. When life revolves entirely around approval, around meeting external standards of worth, the individual loses the thread that connects them to their own soul. And in that interior silence, something happens. The rejected parts of the self, all the qualities and impulses that were deemed unacceptable or inconvenient to the persona, begin to gather in what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It's simply everything that had to be denied in order to maintain the flawless image. Vulnerability, rage, fear of ordinariness, the desire to collapse, the impulse to be wild or foolish or raw, all of it gets locked away. But the unconscious does not forget. The more fiercely we suppress these aspects, the louder they become. The emptiness that successful people feel is often the soul's way of saying, there is more to you than this script. The neurotic pursuit of perfection is, at its core, a terror of being fully human. Modern culture has taught us that incompleteness is failure, when in truth, it is the very language of growth. The self, in the Jungian sense, demands space to unfold, to express its contradictions and paradoxes. But it cannot emerge under the tyranny of control. The process of individuation, Jung's term for becoming who you truly are, requires confrontation with the unknown. It demands that you step into the abyss where your constructed identity falls away, and you stand naked before your own soul. This is where having loses all meaning and being begins to speak. But success rarely allows for that kind of pause. The system rewarded the mask, not the face. The hyperproductive individual lives surrounded by stimulation, incapable of tolerating the creative void, that fertile emptiness which at first glance appears to be barren desert. Without space for boredom, the soul dries up. It is in boredom, in the gaps between accomplishments, that the self whispers its first inspirations. When every moment is filled, there is no doorway through which the deeper self can enter. The ignored unconscious begins to express itself in symbolic ways. Insomnia, anxiety that has no clear source, a creeping disinterest in achievements that once sparked euphoria. These symptoms are not defects to be medicated away. They are messengers. Jung said the psyche does not speak in words, but in moods, dreams, and events. Every breakdown is an invitation. When the individual finally accepts the call to look inward, the process of dissolving the persona begins, not to destroy it, but to see who has been holding it up all along. The path forward is not to reject success, but to allow it to find roots in meaning. This requires a radical honesty, admitting that many of our victories are also defenses. A resume can be a shield hiding a wounded child. A brilliant career can be an elaborate strategy to avoid the fear of being unloved. When you see this without judgment, when you stop defending the image, the energy that was locked in maintaining the facade begins to circulate again. This is the beginning of reconciliation, the meeting between who you were forced to become and who, in the deepest silence, you have always been. The self is not a moral ideal or a spiritual achievement. It is a living totality. It contains both light and shadow, failure and glory, laughter and despair. Jung saw individuation as a religious journey in the most intrinsic sense of the word, a reconnection of the human being to their own origin. And this return does not happen through theory. It happens through lived experiences of inner truth. When the successful person finally allows themselves to fail, to weep, to say, "I don't know," something within them is reborn. It is the self breathing inside the persona that begins to dissolve. At this point, the void stops being terrifying. What once seemed like absence reveals itself as profound presence. The soul does not want perfection, it wants wholeness. When you look at your own shadow without fleeing, success stops being a trophy and becomes the natural translation of a life lived in coherence. The fragmented selves merge into a living center, the point where the human and the divine meet within a single consciousness. But the modern world adores distraction. It fears silence because silence is a mirror. Every time the individual tries to fill the void with new projects, purchases, or goals, they move further from the inner birth that is trying to happen. The void, however, is not the enemy. It is the womb of the self. To name the void is to honor it. To say, "I don't know who I am," is to open space for knowing. This is the courage that transforms crisis into initiation. Jung recognized that this process is painful. To rediscover the self is to pass through the symbolic death of the persona, the collapse of everything you believed yourself to be. But after this crossing, success takes on a new flavor. It becomes authentic expression, not substitute. The person who once chased applause now creates because they must serve life, not the ego. Work becomes offering, not proof of value. And paradoxically, it is at this moment that true success happens, the kind that is independent of recognition. A serenity arises in those who understand that meaning does not live at the top, but at the center. The self does not ask that you abandon the world. It asks that you learn to inhabit it whole. Only the individual reconciled with their shadow is capable of acting freely. They do not seek approval. They share presence. When you feel the void in the midst of what everyone calls victory, do not run. Name the void. Perhaps it is the portal to your reunion with yourself. The self does not shout between rounds of applause. It whispers in the interval between them. Be silent for a moment. Listen. Life does not want you to be perfect. It wants you to be whole. In the instant this understanding blooms, something shifts inside. The void that once seemed like a threat becomes a horizon. Perfection descends from the altar, and humanity rises to the heart. Then you understand that success does not fill you, it merely reveals the size of the space waiting to be occupied by yourself. It is in that space that real triumph lives, the integration of what seemed separate. When you name the void, you finally transform it into presence. And it is from this presence, not from performance, that meaning is born. Allow yourself to occupy your own center. The self is waiting. There is a strange paradox embedded in the heart of modern achievement culture. We are taught that accumulation is the answer, that if we gather enough credentials, enough admiration, enough zeros in the bank account, the hollow feeling will vanish. But Jung knew that the psyche operates by different laws. The unconscious does not care about your LinkedIn profile. It cares about truth. And when the life you are living diverges too far from the life your soul intended, the unconscious will sabotage the facade. It will introduce symptoms, accidents, inexplicable collapses, anything to get your attention. The unlived life does not go quietly into exile. It haunts. It sends dreams that disturb your sleep. It creates obsessions and compulsions, urges that make no rational sense, but that carry the energy of everything you have denied. Why do some successful people suddenly develop addictions? Why do they risk everything for affairs, reckless behavior, implosive choices that seem to contradict their carefully constructed image? Jung would say these are not random acts of self-destruction. They are the shadow's revolt. The unlived self, tired of waiting in the wings, crashes onto the stage. And while this can look like ruin from the outside, it is often the beginning of wholeness. The descent into the shadow is not a detour. It is the path. But the invitation here is not to burn your life down. It is to become curious about the spaces you have been avoiding. What parts of yourself did you exile in order to succeed? What desires were deemed too dangerous, too irrational, too inconvenient? What aspects of your personality did you lock away because they didn't fit the image? These questions are not abstract. They are alive, and the answers do not come through thinking. They come through feeling, through sitting with the discomfort, through allowing the parts of you that were banished to speak again. This is the work of individuation. It is not a linear process. It does not follow a roadmap. It is more like a spiral descent into the center of yourself, where the light and the dark are no longer at war, but are recognized as two faces of the same energy. Jung spoke often of the conjunctio, the alchemical marriage of opposites. In alchemical symbolism, this is the union of sun and moon, king and queen, spirit and matter. Psychologically, it is the reconciliation of the conscious ego with the unconscious self. It is the moment when you stop trying to be good and start trying to be whole. And wholeness always includes what you have called bad. It includes your jealousy, your pettiness, your lust, your rage, your laziness, your despair. Not to indulge them blindly, but to understand them, to see what they are pointing toward. Every so-called negative emotion is a messenger from a neglected part of the soul. Anger often guards a boundary that was violated. Envy points toward an unlived potential. Shame marks the place where you were taught to hide. When you stop pathologizing these feelings and start listening to them, they become guides. The unlived self begins to speak, and with each word, the hollow feeling starts to fill, not with more achievement, but with presence. Presence is not something you achieve. It is something you allow. It is the quality of being here, now, fully inhabiting your own skin, your own contradictions, your own strange, irreplaceable existence. It is the opposite of performance. Performance is always oriented toward the gaze of the other. Presence is oriented toward truth. And truth, in the Jungian sense, is not a set of facts. It is an encounter with what is, including what is uncomfortable, what is unresolved, what is still becoming. The modern obsession with optimization, with peak performance, with hacking every aspect of life for maximum efficiency, is in many ways an attempt to escape this truth. If you can keep moving fast enough, if you can keep achieving enough, you never have to stop and feel the grief of the life you did not live. You never have to face the question, who would I be if I stopped performing? This is the question that terrifies, because the answer is unknown. The self that has been hidden beneath the persona is not a fixed entity. It is a mystery, a process, a becoming. And to meet it requires a kind of courage that no amount of worldly success can prepare you for. It requires the willingness to not know, to be uncertain, to let the ground fall away. Jung called this the encounter with the numinous, the sacred dimension of the psyche. It is not religious in a dogmatic sense, but it is religious in the sense of awe, of recognizing that you are not the center, that something larger is moving through you, that your life is not just a series of accomplishments, but a vessel for a mystery you cannot control. When the persona begins to crack, when the unlived self starts to emerge, the initial experience is often one of terror. Who am I without my titles? Who am I without my achievements? Who am I if I am not admired, if I am not needed, if I am not exceptional? These questions can feel like annihilation, but Jung knew that this death is symbolic. It is the death of the false self, the constructed identity that was never truly you. And on the other side of this death is not emptiness but birth, the birth of the authentic self, the one that does not need external validation because it is rooted in something deeper. This does not mean you will no longer care about your work or your impact. It means the source of your action changes. You no longer create to prove your worth. You create because creation is the natural overflow of a soul in alignment with itself. You no longer seek success to fill a hole. You engage with the world because you have something to offer, something that comes not from ambition, but from abundance, not from lack, but from fullness. This shift is subtle, but profound. It changes everything. The successful person who has done this inner work no longer measures their worth by their achievements. They measure their life by the quality of their presence, by the depth of their relationships, by their capacity to be with what is, without needing it to be different. They become free from the tyranny of the next goal, the next milestone, the next hit of validation, free to simply be. And this freedom is what the unlived self has been longing for all along. It is what was calling from beneath the hollow feeling. It is what the void was trying to show you, that you are not what you do. You are not what you own. You are not what others think of you. You are a mystery, a process, a living question that can only be answered by turning inward and listening. So what does it mean to live the unlived life? It means honoring the call of the self, even when it makes no sense to the persona. It means making space for the parts of you that do not fit the script. It means letting yourself be messy, uncertain, unfinished. It means choosing meaning over applause. It means risking the image in order to find the face. And it means recognizing that success, real success, is not something you attain. It is something you become. You become whole. You become present. You become yourself. This is the path Jung pointed toward. It is not easy. It is not fast. It does not come with a guarantee. But it is the only path that leads to a life that feels real, a life that feels full, a life where the void is no longer a threat, but a threshold. The unlived self is not somewhere far away. It is here, now, waiting beneath the surface of your perfectly constructed life. It is in the dream you keep ignoring, the impulse you keep dismissing, the feeling you keep pushing down. It is in the moments when you catch yourself performing and wonder, just for a second, who you would be if you stopped. That second is the doorway, and the choice to walk through it is the most courageous thing you can do, because on the other side of that door is not chaos, not failure, not the collapse you fear. On the other side is you. The whole you, the you that includes the light and the shadow, the success and the failure, the certainty and the doubt. The you that is not hiding, not performing, not pretending. The you that is simply radically alive. This is what Jung meant by the self. Not an ego inflated by achievement, not a persona perfected by discipline, but a living center that integrates all the contradictions, that holds all the opposites, that is both human and divine, both flawed and sacred. The self is not something you create, it is something you uncover. It has been there all along, beneath the masks, beneath the roles, beneath the desperate need to be seen as successful. And the moment you stop running from it, the moment you turn toward it and say, I am ready, everything changes. The hollow feeling begins to fill, not with more accomplishments, but with presence, not with more validation, but with truth, not with more doing, but with being. And you realize that the life you have been chasing was always here, waiting for you to stop and notice, waiting for you to come home. The unlived self is not a tragedy. It is an invitation. It is the soul's way of saying, there is more, there is depth, there is meaning. There is a life beyond the performance, a life where success is not measured by what you achieve, but by how fully you inhabit your own existence. So, when the hollow feeling comes, and it will come, do not fill it with more goals, more distractions, more noise. Sit with it. Let it speak. Ask it what it wants, and listen. Because what it wants is not more success. What it wants is you, the real you, the whole you. The you that has been waiting in the shadows, patient and persistent, for the day you would finally turn around and see. That day is today. The self is waiting, and it has been waiting your whole life. This is the moment, not tomorrow, not when you have achieved one more thing, not when you are finally ready. Now, because the unlived life cannot be postponed forever. The soul will not wait indefinitely. And the hollow feeling, that strange companion that haunts your victories, is not a problem to be solved. It is a guide. It is showing you the way home. So take the first step, name the void, sit in the silence, allow the persona to soften, let the shadow speak, and trust that beneath the image you have worked so hard to maintain, there is something far more valuable, a self that is wild and whole, broken and beautiful, striving and surrendering all at once. This is individuation. This is the path. And it is the only path that leads to a success that does not feel hollow, because it is not built on performance. It is built on presence. It is built on truth. It is built on the courage to be, fully and without apology, yourself. The unlived self is calling. Will you answer? The answer is not a single word. It is not a formula. It is a practice, a daily discipline of remembering. Remembering that beneath every role you play, there is a soul that does not perform. Remembering that the hollow feeling is not weakness, but wisdom, the psyche's way of protecting you from disappearing entirely into the persona. Remembering that you are not here to be flawless, you are here to be real. And reality, in its fullness, is messy and sacred, painful and ecstatic, fractured and luminous. The Jungian journey does not promise that you will become someone else. It promises that you will become more fully yourself. And that self is not hiding in some distant achievement or spiritual peak. It is here, in the ordinary moments, in the spaces between striving, in the quiet when you stop pretending. It is in the conversation where you risk being vulnerable. It is in the choice to disappoint someone rather than betray yourself. It is in the moment you let go of the image and breathe into the body you have been abandoning in the pursuit of perfection. Jung understood that the soul speaks through the body. When you ignore the whispers, the body begins to shout. Chronic illness, fatigue that no amount of rest can cure, a heaviness that settles into the bones, these are often the body's way of saying, stop. You are living someone else's life. You are performing a script written by fear, by obligation, by the need to be seen as successful. But the body knows the truth. It knows when you are aligned and when you are fractured. It knows when the life you are living matches the life your soul intended, and it knows when you are running from yourself. The return to the self is also a return to the body. It is learning to listen to the signals, to honor the fatigue, to respect the boundaries that the persona has been overriding for years. It is learning to slow down, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Because speed is one of the primary ways we avoid the confrontation with what is unlived. If you are always busy, you never have to sit with the grief of what you sacrificed. You never have to feel the anger that lives beneath the polished surface. You never have to face the loneliness that haunts even the most successful lives. But the soul is patient. It will wait. And when you are finally ready to listen, it will speak, not in grand revelations, though those can come, but in small, quiet nudges. A fleeting thought that won't leave you alone. A pull toward something that makes no logical sense. A restlessness that no amount of productivity can satisfy. These are the threads that, if you follow them, will lead you back to yourself. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's innate capacity to bridge the conscious and the unconscious, to bring what is hidden into the light. But this function only activates when you create space for it, when you stop running. When you sit in the tension between who you have become and who you were meant to be. This tension is not comfortable. It is the friction that precedes transformation, and most people will do anything to avoid it. They will fill their lives with noise, with obligations, with anything that keeps them from having to sit in the unknown. But the unknown is where the self lives. It is where individuation happens. It is where the hollow feeling finally begins to transform into something solid, something real, something that does not collapse when the applause stops. There is a profound loneliness in living the unlived life. Even when you are surrounded by people, even when you are praised and admired, there is a part of you that feels invisible, because the self that is being seen is not the real self, it is the persona. And the persona, no matter how polished, no matter how successful, can never truly be loved, because it is not real. It is a construction, a strategy, a mask, and deep down, you know this. You know that if people saw the real you, the messy, uncertain, unfinished you, they might not stay. And so you keep performing, you keep hiding, you keep achieving, hoping that one day the hollow feeling will disappear. But it won't, not until you risk being seen. Not until you allow someone, even just yourself, to witness the parts of you that do not fit the image. This is the essence of vulnerability. Not weakness, but radical honesty. The courage to say, this is me. Not the highlight reel, not the curated version, but the whole contradictory, struggling, striving, beautiful mess of me. And when you do this, something miraculous happens. The hollow feeling begins to soften. Because you are no longer fragmented. You are no longer dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. You are allowing yourself to exist as a totality. And in that totality, there is a peace that no amount of external success can provide. This does not mean the journey is over. Individuation is not a destination. It is a lifelong process of becoming. There will be moments when the persona reasserts itself, when the fear of being seen pulls you back into hiding. There will be setbacks, regressions, times when you forget what you have learned. But each time you return to the practice of listening, of honoring the self, of choosing presence over performance, the path becomes clearer. You begin to trust that you are not your achievements. You are not your failures. You are something larger, something that contains both and is reduced to neither. You are a process, a becoming, a mystery, unfolding. And the unfolding is the point, not the arrival. Not the moment when you finally have it all figured out, but the willingness to stay with the questions, to live into the answers, to trust that the self knows the way even when the conscious mind does not. Jung believed that the psyche is inherently purposeful. It is always moving toward wholeness, always trying to integrate what has been split, always reaching for balance. But it cannot do this work if you are constantly overriding it with the will of the ego, with the demands of the persona, with the relentless pursuit of more. The psyche needs space. It needs silence. It needs permission to be irrational, to be inefficient, to lead you down paths that do not make sense from the outside. This is the language of dreams, of synchronicities, of those moments when the universe seems to conspire in your favor. These are not accidents. They are the self reaching out, trying to get your attention, trying to guide you back to the path you were meant to walk. But you have to be paying attention. You have to slow down enough to notice. You have to be willing to follow the thread, even when it leads you away from what is safe, what is known, what is successful in the eyes of the world. Because the self does not care about worldly success. It cares about truth. It cares about alignment. It cares about the fulfillment of your unique potential, the expression of what only you can offer. And that expression might not look like success in the conventional sense. It might be quieter, smaller, less visible, but it will feel real. It will feel true. And in that truth, the hollow feeling finally dissolves. Not because you have filled it with something external, but because you have stopped creating it. The hollow feeling was always the gap between the life you were living and the life your soul intended. And when that gap closes, when the outer and the inner align, the result is not perfection. It is integration. It is wholeness. It is the capacity to stand in your own center and say, "This is my life." Not the life I thought I should live, not the life others expected, but the life that is mine. Flawed, uncertain, unfinished, and utterly, profoundly real. This is the unlived self coming home. This is the moment the persona softens and the face beneath is finally allowed to breathe. This is the moment you stop performing and start living. And in that living, you discover something Jung knew all along. The self was never lost. It was only waiting. Waiting for you to stop running, waiting for you to turn inward, waiting for you to ask the question that changes everything. Who am I when no one is watching? The answer to that question is not something you think. It is something you become. And the becoming is the entire point. This is the path. This is the work. This is the journey from hollow success to meaningful presence. And it begins the moment you decide to listen to the whisper beneath the applause, the voice that has been calling your name all along, the voice of the self, the voice of the soul, the voice that says, "Come home." You are not your achievements. You are not your image. You are the living mystery beneath it all. And that mystery is waiting to be lived.